That's good.
All right, Mom, thank you. I am recording now. I'd asked you to be willing to sit to videotape questions or any answers to questions that I or your granddaughter Erin, or we can expand this to my siblings, to your other grandchildren, about you, about your life, and appreciate you doing this. Thank you. That being said, before I ask any questions, I'd like you to just say something or share anything you want. I know you've been thinking about it, so
Yeah.
the floor is yours.
Okay. So many years. So I'm Peggy, otherwise known as Pucky. Nana Pucky. And a little explanation of the name. I firmly am a family psychotherapist, and I believe that when you're working with someone, they should be able to be called the name that they would like. And the same is true of little children, to name their grandparents the way they would like. So, Shannon came along 2 years after the first grandchild, who didn't know what to call me. And Shannon tried to say Peggy, tried and tried. And finally she came out with Pucky. It was as close as you could get to Peggy. Everybody cheered. So that's why my name is Grandma Pucky. And you have to be very careful saying that word, by the way. So both Miranda, the oldest grandchild, and the oldest daughter of my daughter, and then Shannon, who's 2 years later, asked if I would tell them about me. I mean, practically in those words. With Miranda, she loved to make up stories from the time she was about 2. And so she would start asking me to make up stuff about me if I could change my life. Very interesting for a young girl. Shannon loved to pretend we were reporters, and she would interview me and put me on the spot. And she said, "Do you know who your family is?" I thought that was, and I thought, you know what, I don't know if I do. But what that did was kicked open a memory, and this is what I talked to Shannon about, and then later Miranda. For some reason, as a young girl, growing up without a mother who died suddenly, and my father who worked all the time, I didn't really know who my family was. And my brothers were out playing sports all the time. But my father would send me to California to visit my Aunt Mary or Aunt Connie or Uncle Dan, and they lived in different parts of California. And I would interview them to find out about my family. And specifically turned out to be my aunts and uncles. And so that's where this idea came from. How are we going to pass down memories of our family, and especially of our siblings? There's nothing closer bloodline than your siblings. Cut. So, siblings. So I basically lost my mother and father at the age of 10. So I just clung to my siblings and watched them, watched what they did, how did they navigate the world, because but we all went our own way in our own directions. And I'm focusing here on siblings because I really want you siblings, grandchildren, to get to know each other and your extended family.
Could I ask you to elaborate, if I may interject, when you say you basically lost your mother and your father at the age of 10?
Yeah. Oh, so we're on. Well, my brothers have helped me to see that when my mother died, a big part of my father died. They were terrific partners, and they had 13 children together. And he was he had a big business. He was very active in the community and with the Catholic Church and with different orphanages. And he wanted to keep those up, but he had to double up on the amount of work he did because it's quite expensive to get help to take care of children. And so my brother Bill, I'm going to quote something from him in a minute. My brother Bill said, basically, I remember, Peggy, when we were in the hearse, following the hearse when our father died in 1965. And I said to my brothers, my God, I'm an orphan. I was 25 at the time. And that we're about to bury our father. And Bill looked at me and said, basically, you've been an orphan for a very long time. And that's because when one parent dies, often a big part of the second part of the partnership dies. So that's what I meant by that.
And so you were returning to the siblings getting to know one another?
Right, so I felt strange in my family because I had wonderful siblings, but I was the only girl. I had an older sister, but she married years before I was born, 26 years older. At any rate, what I'm doing, I'm going to read a quote from my brother Bill, who wrote this amazing book called Dad's Wisdom, that's our father. Mary's Strength, that's his wife, amazing woman. And My Good Fortune, and he attributes that saying to my father too. It's a memoir and a tribute. Well, Bill and I got very, very close during the pandemic, especially when one of our brothers died. And he asked me to help him as a practicing Catholic. Not everybody has remained that in my family, but because we wanted to make sure Tommy was buried in a Catholic church and with the ceremony, and that he lived in California, that I would get the body back and we'd do all the right stuff. And then get the pictures together so that we'd have a ceremony in a certain place we could be in during the pandemic. It was not an easy job, but I love my brother Tommy, so it was a privilege. Through that process, which we did around Bill's swimming pool, Bill and I really got to know each other. We really could understand our ins and outs and what makes us tick. And we never took the time, important sentence, we never took the time to get to know each other until then. So when he wrote the book, and he gave me a copy of his book that he wrote recently, and in it says, to Peggy, my wonderful sister and friend, you are a marvel. Marvel girl. Bill. Now I'm getting choked up because that is how I feel about my family. But I had never seen it in writing, that anybody in my family felt that way about me. So that's another note, that while we have each other, Let's put it out there. So, I was going to read some things that Bill wrote. I had asked him if he could answer this question that my grandchildren and children ask. What is the real story of our relative by the name of Grania O'Mal from County Mayo, Ireland? So Bill did that. He did the investigation. He because there's a lot of Irish lore about this famous woman. So I'm going to read this. The family lore has it that we Conways descend from 16th century Irish pirates. My grandmother, Bridget O'Malley Conway, counts as her direct ancestor the notorious Grania O'Mal, which is Malley, of County Mayo, the Pirate Queen, and a woman in possession of fiery independence and strong anti-establishment sentiments. You go, girl. At age 11, Grania entered the family business, which was to work as a pirate on the high seas. She married a fellow pirate, gave birth aboard a pirate ship to a son. She eventually bore several sons. Eventually, in one of many battles on the high seas, a rival clan killed Grania's swashbuckling husband, and a series of retaliations ensued. Raucous as her life was, Grania is best known not for piracy, but for archly defending Ireland against English rule through her shrewd political sensibility. After being caught by the Brits, Grania spent years in an English prison. In 1593, she petitioned Queen Elizabeth I of England to release her brother, her half-brother, and 2 sons from prison. The British Queen said that she would grant the request only if the Pirate Queen Grania would cease her rebellions against the crown. Grania was a fierce fighter, but she agreed to Elizabeth's terms for the sake of the family. As she was being dismissed from Queen Elizabeth's presence, however, having engaged in direct woman-to-woman negotiation, however, Grania, the Pirate Queen, refused to bow down, and even to this day, you bow down to the Queen. She refused. I've lost the page. Even as a prisoner fighting for her and for her family's life, Grania O'Malley retained her fierce pride. She considered herself of equal rank to the Queen and absolutely would not bow down. This is noted by historians as her most famous act of defiance. It is also the action of hers of which I am most proud. I think that's great. So that explains, I could go on, he doesn't get into this, but what Grania did was, many nations came to conquer Ireland. And as pirates take possessions, take trees and crops and everything. So she, what they noted in other countries was Grania was keeping the English away, but she also was keeping the Spanish away, the Phoenicians, way back when. Let's see, the Moors. So Elizabeth thought, well, how is she doing that? She's gotten pretty good at this. I think I better befriend her. So they became friends, and Grania agreed to protect England from these marauders, especially the Spanish and the Portuguese. So I'm just throwing that in. So this is a story that, of course, the women in our family especially are very proud of, because she's such a famous woman. You'll hear of her all over Grace O'Malley, Grania O'Malley, Grace O'Malley. The pirate, they may not remember that name, but the pirate queen of Ireland. And so if you can be any descendant, like I went to Ireland with my family back after I graduated from high school, and I recall people saying, "Are you really related to Grania O'Malley?" And we're like, yeah. So I want to read a couple of other things right from my brother's book.
While you look for that, you told me when I asked you about the book if this passage or others were well researched.
Oh, yes.
Because he had help writing the book, and that included research.
It did.
Genealogical and historical.
Yeah, he was very clear that he wanted, we're all noted for the Irish gift of gab and the proclivity to stretch a story. You know, if you get a laugh, you're going to keep the story going. So he wanted this to be as authentic as you can, and you know, you're writing about things from the distance. So he hired a woman to help him who had somehow, Bill's daughter Anne heard of a woman who was quite, the old saying is ghost writer, but she is an editor. And I mean, the art of editing is amazing, because that's what you do. You have to make sure you try to keep it to the truth, and you have to eliminate any extra nonsense.
I think that's sufficient.
Okay.
What were you going to look for next?
Oh, good. And we can get more personal, but oh, I will say one thing. Okay, you can put it on. This isn't in the book. Today, I'm over at the pool swimming, and I'm like, my God, I don't think I've told any of my kids about my Grandma Annie, my mother's mother. She's the one that I got to know. I only knew her for 3 years. She died when I was 3, but she had such an effect on me. And I remember my mother saying to my mother, you know, what is it about Grandma Annie? And she just has this effect on me. And my mother said, well, I think it goes this way. You know, you can forget about what people say to you. You can forget about what people look like. But you know, you never forget how you feel when you're with someone. And you are experiencing that with Grandma Annie. And I just get chills when I think that, because it was with all the chaos in my family, with 13 kids and 2 maids that had lived there, and aunts and uncles that were in and out, that escaping from Ireland. But Grandma Annie would come in, and it was like, you know, the skies opened. It was just, she was hilarious. She was, she didn't care what people thought, if she was offending anybody. She was just, we're here to have a good time. Interesting note, this will tell about my dad. She also, if she was getting cold one winter and she stayed with us, she would just up and disappear. And my father would go all over the place trying to find out, where is Grandma Annie, his wife's mother. And we found out that what she would do is she would get sick of the Cleveland weather. She would hop on a Greyhound bus and get herself down to Florida and stay in some flop house or something. And my father was horrified. And so he ended up buying her a little cottage. And he just said, yeah, go for it, girl, but you gotta promise me you're gonna stay in the cottage. So that's telling of my grandma, and it's telling of my dad. He wasn't gonna control her, but he could help keep her safe. That's another important message. So, we could stop for, so, my family was, I have a plaque in my bedroom, and I have a whole wall dedicated to my relatives. And on there was a citation that was written by the editor of the Cleveland magazine, a Cleveland newspaper, at the time of our mother's death. And in the magazine or newspaper, he wrote this article, Mother, big print. And Margaret N. Nelson is, in a sweet and modest way, became one of Cleveland's most famous persons. That's my mom. She was the wife of Timothy J. Joseph, president of Fisher Brothers Company, one of our best citizens. She was the mother of 11 sons and 2 daughters, each of whom has been an individual. One of her sons gave his life to the Air Force in the recent World War. Others have made school and athletic history, including the captain of this fall's Yale University football team. That was Bill. Mrs. Conway taught the extraordinary family of children to hate evil and to stand as examples of the heights which an American family can attain. What power is there in mere fame and wealth, or prominence of authority, that compares with the influence of this one woman? Monuments have been raised to less important people. The Conway family will always be hers. So I do believe that my father really instilled this memoir to my mother, you know, to be, I remember him saying, you know, you do whatever it is that you feel you are drawn to do. Doesn't matter if you're the president of a company or you're the garbage collector. Be the best damn garbage collector you can be. There are many paths in life, and our mother chose to be a mother. And so that really has had a big effect on me. So I've always wanted to be the best mother I could be. And I fell short of that, I felt, through my drinking years. Fortunately, I've been able to clean that up, turn that over to God, and become the best mother I can be. And then come the grandchildren. And if I hadn't cleaned up my act, there's a moral here, and we'll clean this up. In this book, Bill talks about a quote by Winston Churchill. Success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. And Aaron and I have talked about that. So, you know, I really fell on my face a lot until the age of 34, and I had 5 children. And it came to my awareness through a gift from my higher power, whom I call God, that I had to stop behaving this way, that I was falling short of the path that I was to follow. And consequently, today, I've never doubted that I'm the best grandparent I can be because I'm sober. And with that comes the ability to pay attention to what I'm thinking, saying, and doing. Anyhow, that's enough of that.
Well, that was a very interesting and heartfelt statement. I wondered if I could break into the memoir and ask you some more lighthearted questions.
Yeah,
And we can always get back, and you can feel free to
the memoir.
not answer any of this or
Oh yeah, I
defer to
mean, this,
answer-
we don't know
answer
of
it
what
later.
we'll use and what we won't. Okay.
These, I think, would be some things that your granddaughters would like to hear, and they can always ask it again. You can answer it again. What were you like as a child?
Oh,
Secondary question to that is, what were you like as a teenager? Answer either one first.
now, as a child, well, does she ever sit down? That was the statement. Yeah, I just love life, honest to God. You know, I had that pain of my mother gone, but I actually have this gift of an incredible amount of energy, and I'm curious about everything. Sometimes not appropriately, but I have energy, I'm curious, and I have abilities. So as a young child, I excelled in sports and school and collecting friends. That's what I was like.
I believe it.
Now, as an adolescent, what was I like as an adolescent?
If that's the same as a teenager,
Yeah, a teenager.
some people may break it up into 3
Yeah.
stages.
Well, let's see. You know, pretty much an exaggeration of what I was like as a kid. There was one that I've just remembered recently, one thing about me as a teenager. Now, my mother died at 10, and I played the piano. I want to put this in here. From the time I was 6 years old. And there's a little note in one of my brothers, Bud's book, that everybody in our family took piano lessons, but I was the only one that excelled at it, or stayed at it. It was something my mother and I did together. And she loved listening to me play Claire de Lune and Moonlight Sonata, and a lot of classical pieces. And so that's when I sat down. Second time I would sit down, training horses. So as an adolescent, teenager, whatever you want to use, from about the time I was 11, I think, yeah, at 11, we did get horses for Neil and I so that we would have something to do to keep us out of trouble. And so we spent a lot of time training new horses and working with our little nieces and nephews to teach them how to ride and take care of horses in saddles and bridles. So I continued to do well in school and in sports. And then I got involved with boys. Now, I went to a good Catholic school, and they do put the fear of God in you. And my father would take Neil and I to the orphanages that he supported and the house for unwed mothers for lessons. And I knew, because I grew up on a farm, how you make babies, so I made sure I didn't do that, but I sure had fun with boys. But mostly because, as my friends still say to me, a couple of them are still alive, when you had Peggy as a date, you had a double date. You had a fun friend and an athlete, and then they left it at that. So that, as a teenager, I excelled at piano. That was in horseback riding. I could do that for hours and be at the piano or riding a horse, training them. And I think that made me different than some other teenagers. I did have a couple of friends that were also either into horses or into piano, but I happened to have enough energy to do both of them. And to this day, I would love to train kids how to learn how to ride. There's a thing that says if you teach a young woman how to handle a horse, she'll never be taken advantage of. So.
Thank you. That was a great take on those questions.
Got some more?
I have a list here, but I don't want to derail you from other things you've
Yeah, I do want to share, yes.
That Bill has provided.
All right, I want to share, all right, you ready to go?
We're still taping.
Oh, okay. So a big focus is, we always felt this is a bit of an Irishism, which is, if we're gifted with, the saying is, if you're lucky enough to be Irish, you're lucky enough, and share the wealth. It's like you've gotten these gifts, you have the gift of gab, a sense of humor, usually we're bright enough, we'll share that with other people. And it took a while for me to learn that I actually could ask for help. This was a defect of mine as a young person. I really was fearful of asking someone for help. The fear was they'd say no, and that would annihilate me. Ego, I don't know what that was. But now is for me, an important part of this story, of the family, because family is where we learn to problem solve, to ask for help, to learn how to navigate in the world. And it helps to have family parents that let you experiment yourself and not do everything for you. And yet, sometimes you have to ask for help. Well, here's Bill's statement that when I read this in the book, I started crying. And he talks about 1986. A little backdrop is that my youngest child, Timothy Conway, was born in 1970 and died in 1980. So this is about this statement. And once again, to me, this is such a statement about family. So Bill says, I met yours truly on Chagrin Boulevard, having breakfast with Peggy, my sister, 11 years younger than me, and she's in town from the West Coast. I'm glad to see Peggy, but I'm a little strained from work. I love my job and I'm deeply fulfilled by it, but I give all my energy to Fairmont Minerals and to my wife and to our children, each of whom have launched their own lives, but we still give them attention. So I'm looking forward to an upbeat, lighthearted catch-up on Peggy's life, which I anticipated would take minimal energy from me. I habitually avoid discussions of anything negative, this is Bill, not only with Peggy, but with almost everyone. I'm giving my all to the company, and it leaves little bandwidth for solving problems in my everyday life. Especially in this moment, I just want my egg and toast in a how are you doing type of breakfast with my smart, sociable, and effervescent sister. Surprise. However, as we eat, Peggy begins sharing with me some of her personal issues and concerns. At one point, she explains she is momentarily down on her luck. It's called minimization. Down on her luck and would like advice and temporary assistance. I know that as the youngest, she received the least help from Dad in terms of being launched into the world. And that was a true loss and a lacking in her life. Can you help me out, she asked. Peggy, I replied, annoyed. I can't help you right now. I've got to worry about my own family. Ugh. She puts her fork down on her plate and looks at me with hurt and disbelief. I am your family. Ugh. Peggy's poignant comment was appropriate. What was going on with me? Had my natural instinctive affection for my family left me? Now he goes on and on to explain what it means to be a family member, an adult, a friend, and pay attention. So we don't need to get into any more than that. He brings it up many times and says, back to Peggy's poignant question, which is pretty neat.
You mean he brings that up in his memoir?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
Like here, I did, wait a minute, something about, being part of a broader family. We're submerged under that mindset. Miranda, Megan's daughter Miranda, and Nicole asked me if I would please tell them everything I can remember, and this was about 2 years ago, about the family, because they said, we have such a teeny family, and we love to know that we're from the Conways, but we need to know more about you. So Bill, that was about 4 years ago, and that helped him a lot.
Well, I will, as I explained off camera to you, I will make this recording accessible to all the family members.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay, so if this is something, Peggy and I had our breakfast at yours truly, and I observed with growing, with his company growing, that with his part of the broader family, he would go back often and think about, as things were growing and his kids were getting older and the company was more successful, he'd go back to Peggy's question. And he remembered saying, Peggy, thanks for asking. I would like to do what I can to help you. Let's talk about what you need and where I might be more of help. So that, he said, I did not do that right away. But over the years, following that meeting, developing abiding admiration for Peggy as the youngest amongst us, she lost mom at age 10 and says she began drinking at that age. And by her early 20s, she had alcoholism. It had me. And after attending Barrett College, well, then he goes on about my recovery. But I remember he said to me, what did you ever do with that scholarship you got in college? We were talking about this, and you were drinking, you weren't drinking in high school, and you got a scholarship to college. And it was a music scholarship at a very prestigious Lake Forest college. And he said, what did you ever do with that? And I explained to him that Dad decided, you can accept the scholarship, but wouldn't it be nice if we gave it to a family that needed it? He said, I can afford to send you to college. And then I just forgot about it. But you want to know something? I happened to meet the woman that we gave the scholarship to.
Really?
Yes, and she was from a very poor family. They lived in some farm somewhere, I don't know where.
When did you meet her?
I met her in, well, actually, I went to college with her. But we talked about this in Salamanca, Spain, Salamanca. And we were at a dinner at a round table of college friends. And I said, boy, we're all from different places. How did we, we're very close friends. And some of us were music majors and some were this and that. How did we all get to this college? And so let's explain how that was. So we go around the room and one woman says, well, we couldn't afford college. And she said, I was bright enough, but I couldn't afford the books. And we got a call. This family in Ohio wanted to offer the scholarship. And we looked at I looked at her and I said, did you have, because we were in school, but this never came up. We put it together, that was.
Was that on a college reunion trip to Spain?
We went to Spain after we graduated.
Oh, it was a graduation
Yeah.
trip. Fascinating.
So she was in a whole different department, so it never the question. And you don't, and she said after, she said, I didn't want to say that someone gave me my, but that is an interesting story. So Bill said, what did you do with your piano? Because I want it as a concert pianist. And he said, well, I know you play still, but what did you ever do anything with it? He said, well, I tried to teach my kids and grandkids. I said, but I use it as a therapist. I have the piano in the home. And I'll work with kids just to teach them little ways to use there. But he said, I always wondered about that. What did you do with that scholarship? So that's that.
All right, Mom, so you just had some really good information there that you shared about what Bill's response in his memoir was to you asking for help.
Yeah.
And offline you were explaining some of what this is bringing to your mind of your hesitancy and actual fear and very complex emotions about asking for help and why you didn't ask for help sooner. And that makes me think of a question I had in mind for you. You were born in 1938.
Yeah.
Now, much has been written about what's now known as the Greatest Generation, that as often associated with World War II, both the actions at home and abroad in the war effort, but at home in the support for the war. And I think of you as part of the greatest generation. You were
Absolutely.
exposed to that. What are your memories of
Wow.
that, of our culture at that time, that can-do spirit and not wanting to ask for help, but
Exactly, yes. Well, it's so good you brought this up. It's so important to know history, and one of my minors in college was history, because I want to know where we come from way back when the world began. But we were war casualties at home who were not in the war, but we were casualties. But I didn't know this. I was aware that I had a hard time getting my mother's attention. And my brothers would say, "Would you leave her alone? She has enough to worry about." And of course, so I'm going to try to answer this. So that's one way. Everybody was so distracted. You would watch the mailman come up the sidewalk, because it could be with information about a brother being lost at sea.
how many brothers did you have in the war effort?
5. The first one died right at the beginning of the war as a pilot. So the other thing, you don't ask for help. The idea is we're bright enough, go do it yourself. So I had forgotten this, but it's very ingrained in us. And the other thing is about drinking. You know how to drink. You're Irish by God, you're American by God, and you can hold your liquor. The history in America, I don't know how it is in other countries, but in the United States, it's the greatest generation after the war. That's when they were building houses and cars, and during the war, I think it was a war. Does that?
That does, thank you. And with that, I think I will close this segment so I can make sure I can get it recorded and uploaded.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll be tearing up and maybe have other people to ask questions, like
Yes.
my granddaughter Erin or others.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mom. I really appreciate this.
You're
It's been
welcome.
very good for me.
Good.
And we'll carry on.
I didn't say one thing about my kids or we're not there yet.
More
Yeah,
to come.
more will be revealed. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.